It is 8:48 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. It's the 3rd day of August 2026, and this is episode 1364 of Bitcoin. And we're going to do the Coldcard thing because we really need to do the Coldcard thing. I want to take us through the timeline of what's occurred and sort of tease out what happened. However, before I even get there, before I even look at the outline that I've drafted here, we need to talk about something else that has to do with Coldcard. And that is the fact that for years on this podcast, I've been telling people that Coldcard is great. And I was wrong. I was really wrong. However, one thing that I can say is that I also used Coldcard. That's why I recommended it, because I used it. I didn't use a Jade. I wasn't using Trezor. I used to use a Ledger, but I bricked 2 of them. So I never liked their hardware in the first place after I bricked the first one. So I wasn't recommending that. However, it turns out that Ledger is still safer than Coldcard. And that's really sad. And because I've been recommending Coldcard, because I was using Coldcard, I want to go through a couple of things here. I tried. It's like I don't have any sponsors on this show, but I did reach out. And I'm not really good at reaching out to sponsors. I'm not one. For some reason, I'm just not wired that way to reach out to sponsors. But I had been using Coldcard for so long, and I had never had a problem with it that I knew about. That's sort of the issue here with Coldcard. I did reach out to Novak, Rodolfo Novak from CoinKite, to see if they possibly be interested in sponsoring the podcast. And we went back and forth a couple of times, and it actually kind of looked like they might actually sponsor the show. And then I don't know what it was. I guess I gave them my numbers, and this was actually, I think this was a little bit over 2 years ago. I gave them my numbers, like download numbers and stuff like that, and everything seemed fine until they asked me the question, how many followers do you have on Twitter and other social media? Well, I don't really have that many followers on Twitter and social media because I didn't normally use it. And if you've been following the show for any length of time at all, you know that I got booted off at Twitter, and I can't remember how many followers I had at the time. It was decent. It still wasn't great. It wasn't like 1.8 million followers or anything like that. But and all of a sudden, once I said the numbers of my social media followers, they ghosted me. CoinKite, the people I was talking to at CoinKite just ghosted me. I never heard another word from them. Tried writing them back, say, hey, where are we on this thing? And no response. Just gone. The whole conversation just literally died. And even after that, I was recommending Coldcard simply because I used it. That was the way that I was securing my own stack. And that stack was secured as single sig, one signature that was generated by the Coldcard with no passphrase and no rolled dice. So as you might imagine, when the news broke, July, I think I first heard about it July 31st. That was the first time that I had heard about it. I shit my pants. And I went immediately to go check what the hell was going on with my wallet. And everything was there. Everything was there. And the reason that I didn't lose anything was simply because that laziness that caused me to not construct a big passphrase as a 25th word to my 24-word seed phrase. and I didn't roll 100, rolls of dice to add extra entropy, and I didn't do any of that, that laziness also caused me to never upgrade the firmware of my Coldcard wallet after I received it in the mail. And there was even like, kind of a warning on, well, not a warning, but there was a, hey, advisable, update your firmware when you get this. Well, I never did that. So I was still on firmware version 3.x, whatever it was. I looked at it when I was migrating my funds, which actually came next. But that's the reason. And we'll go through in the outline of, we'll go through what has actually occurred, why the firmware upgrade to 4.x was the problem. Right. So I was able to get my funds off of that Coldcard address and onto a brand new address that was basically rolled by a different manufacturer whose name I'm not going to name, because at this point I don't know what to advise anymore. Yeah. There's a couple of hardware wallets that have been audited time and time again, but this time by AI, but and they've come up pretty green as far as, yeah, everything's okay, but I don't want to say the names at this point because I don't know who to trust, which is okay. That, honestly, that's sort of a the best reaction that you can have is, I don't trust anything. I don't trust anybody. I don't trust. There's nothing to there. I can't trust at this point. Now I think that'll change as time goes on. But right now, I don't even know whether to tell you to put all your Bitcoin onto some kind of central holding like River or Unchained. But the second that I say those names, I'm like, well, fuck, I don't know anything about, I don't literally know exactly what their custody setup is. So I can't recommend that either. Do you send all your money to Coinbase? I have no idea what their custody setup is because I've been so used to self-custody for all these years that I don't know what to tell you. And I think that this is it's not a good place to be, but it's the best place that we can be because we're going back years to where when we said don't trust, verify, we actually meant it. And we failed across the board on the whole thing. Now I keep seeing, Odell is just getting fucking savaged on X as well as Nostr because his relationship with 1031 and Open Dimes and Novak, who is the guy that started CoinKite, who builds the aforementioned Coldcard, because he was recommending it. Except that what I'm seeing is language that suggests that somehow he knew that this failure was there and he was recommending it anyway because God forbid that him and people like Marty Bent lose sponsorships. Well, remember, I was recommending Coldcard and I didn't have a sponsorship. Never got a dime from CoinKite. I tried. I want to make that very clear, as I did earlier. I tried. I kind of wanted them as a sponsor, but that just never materialized. But yet I was still recommending Coldcard because I used it. That's how I was securing my stack. And I was wrong, but that's why I had been saying use a Coldcard. I did also mention, hey, I've heard Trezor is pretty good and Bitbox is pretty good, but mainly I just stayed with Coldcard. I knew the system, I knew how it worked. I was used to the flow, and it's that kind of attitude that gets people into trouble all the time. So what the hell are we supposed to do now? Well, one of the things that I'm pretty sure that we're probably not supposed to do is just go and blame all the podcasters and influencers and anybody who said anything good about something that caused a lot of people to lose a lot of money. life savings, entire futures wiped the fuck out. And I also don't think that we should be blaming ourselves as users, because a lot of people are saying that. See, you should have just stayed, you should have just had your Bitcoin custodied over at Coinbase and you'd be fine. You know, I'm not sure if any of this is constructive at all. Actually, for me, I know it's not constructive. It's just at this point, so many people are so wrecked. So many lives are completely destroyed. So many futures are now going to be unrealized because of this shit. I will say this, though. If you want to blame anybody, it's got to be CoinKite. It's got to be the fact that they didn't do code review, apparently. At least that's what it looks like to me. Nobody really went back and tested exactly how strong the entropy was in these cold cards to construct the addresses or the wallet creation process. We'll get into it, but I just want to make it clear that I've contemplated, and this is my most important thing that I'm probably going to say today. I've contemplated deeply over the last 3 days. Should I say that I'm sorry? It's a good question. Even Rodolfo Novak, the guy behind CoinKite, he said he was sorry. Coldcard made an announcement. They said, the Coldcard X account said they were sorry. Of course, they made sure to, basically say, and by the way, there's nothing we can do about your funds. They're gone. And I immediately started asking myself, well, then what good is an apology? What good is it? I mean, honestly, what good is it? I'm not sitting here saying that I don't feel sorry. We'll get to that here in a second. But I'm trying to figure out, what good is it? Is it going to bring back people's money? No. Is it going to make people that lost their money feel better? No. So the question becomes, what purpose does saying I'm sorry serve? Is it for the person saying that they're sorry themselves? Is it think of it like a funeral? Who's the funeral for? Oh, it's for the guy that died. No, it's not. That person's dead. For all we know, we don't know if there's an afterlife or not. I happen to believe in one, but I don't know. I have no proof. I can't audit that. I'm unable to audit the CoinKite code. Well, mostly unable to audit the CoinKite code. We'll get to that. No, the funeral is for the people that survived. That's who the funeral is for. But in this case, an apology, is that for the people that lost all their money? Or the people that didn't lose their money? Who's the apology for, and what good does it do? After contemplating this for quite a while, I've decided that it's applicable to say, I'm sorry. If you got a cold card, because that's what I used and that's what I had recommended, I can only say that I'm sorry. But that's honestly, just saying it feels fucking ridiculous. There's nothing that anybody can do to really fix this. Not right now, and not under the environment that we find ourselves in mentally. Now, it's possible that this wallet that holds all the stolen Bitcoin, somehow or another, the fact that there's never been this many eyeballs on a single wallet since the Mt. Gox hack and Silk Road hacks. But I think that what's going to happen is that this particular wallet or set of wallet addresses that are involved in this are going to be the most looked after, the most watched, the most blacklisted wallet, which again, This goes right against everything that I've said up until now. No wallet should be able to be blacklisted. But this one, and I'm not even saying that it should be blacklisted. I'm just saying, how do we proceed in our thought process after we've talked about Bitcoin being for enemies and, like sanctioned countries using Bitcoin to get around all this stuff because Bitcoin is unstoppable. And yet we find ourselves in this huge conundrum because we know that Bitcoin represents the absolute destruction of people's, not only their livelihoods and not only their futures, but suicides are going to occur from this if they haven't happened already. People are physically going to lose their life because of this. And it's hard to wrap the mind around the magnitude of what's happened because it struck at the center of what should have been an easy thing to decide. You custody your Bitcoin yourself because we have the tools to do it. And then we find out that some of the tools that we had to do it with were so far beyond being below par for the course that it was laughable to screw all this up. But again, there's nothing to actually say other than anybody who is affected by this, or even close to the flames, even if you knew somebody who was affected by this, the only thing that I and anybody else can say is that we're sorry. And we also need to understand immediately that doesn't do dick. That's why I contemplated whether or not to even apologize. Because it's not going to bring anything back. It's not going to fix anything for me. It's not going to fix anybody out there. It's not going to fix the situation. It's just words. Just words. But we've crossed a Rubicon. Not just for Bitcoin, not just for self-custody. This entire thing reaches so far beyond the Bitcoin sphere and the financial sphere that it's kind of eye-watering. We're never going to be able to go back to the world that was. And I find it oddly weird that this happens to be right before what's going to be a quarter century of September 11th, where the world changed forever again. I don't know why I'm connecting the two. It's just that I've been having these weird feelings over the last few months that something is terribly wrong. And I had been feeling like that ever since 9/11 actually happened, except not to this degree. So let's get into what exactly happened with Coldcard. So around early July the 30th, Bitcoin begins moving from particular addresses that were generated by Coldcard hardware wallets. They were from the addresses that were generated by the hardware that is the Coldcard wallet, whether Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, Mark 4, Mark 5, or the new Q, right? Except that the Mark 1s and the Mark 2s don't seem to be having that much of an issue. We'll get to that. And it has something to do with the firmware, and we've already talked about that a little bit. But the Mark 3s, the Mark 4s, the Mark 5s, and the Q, they're definitely all affected if they have the firmware 4.x on it. If you're before that, if you're like 3.01 or something like or 3.02 or whatever, those seem to be unaffected for various reasons that we'll get into. Still, though, many of the owners believe that these seeds that have been generated by these wallets, even if they've never touched an internet connected device, and they believe that because they knew that they never connected their Coldcard to like the internet. They never put their seed phrase into a, hey, check and see if my seed phrase is okay. Yeah, don't do that. None of that. There's like these seeds that were used to construct the wallets, and that's the most important part of the wallet, is how it's constructed, or in other words, the seed. Sometimes we use seed phrases, but there's also how is the number generated that seeds everything in the wallet construction. That's sort of what we're talking about. And none of this information for many of these people touched the internet. It was not like somebody got a hold of their particular address and decided to target them, or like, it's not like a whole bunch, some people figured out a whole bunch of like somehow or another collected through the internet, everybody who had ever had a Coldcard and somehow or another leaked their seed phrase or their wallet private key on the internet. That's not what happened. They didn't collect all this information up and put it into a great big spreadsheet and just one day decided to say, okay, here we go. That's not what happened. But one thing that we are sure of is that this was coordinated. These sweeps of these Bitcoin wallets were coordinated. They looked to me to be like or not just to me, to a lot of people, they looked like they were automated. And there was an incredible amount of them. And we don't even know if this shit is over yet, because there was a first wave, and then we discovered that there was like other waves. And right now we're still in this fourth wave of sweeps of Coldcard. That's the affected wallet. As near as I can tell, and I've been looking at this all weekend long, I can't find any other, even MetaMask, which you should never use. Nobody's even stolen from that thing. And that's basically an Ethereum hot wallet that's on the internet. And even that seems secure, which is sad. Really fucking sad. So this Bitcoin begins leaving wallets on the 30th of July. And it was leaving addresses that were generated by what should have been, and what even I had purported to be, one of the safest wallets on the planet. And I and everybody else was wrong. These devices, they were offline. The backup's hidden. Some hadn't even been touched in years, yet the Bitcoin moved anyway. So how is it that somebody can steal from an air-gapped wallet without ever touching the device? Well, the wallet that was generated by this particular firmware version on these particular wallets, the Mark III, the Mark IV, the Mark V, and the Q from CoinKite, these are all Coldcard wallets. No other wallets that we know of are affected from any other manufacturer. Not yet, anyway. We'll get to that. But these are called air-gapped wallets. That's what I mean. The seeds never touch the internet. The device really, the way that you can do it, you don't have to do it this way, but you can completely never, ever hook the device to a computer to be able, for the seeds to be able to somehow or another leak on the internet. That's called air gapping, right? And like the way that I would do transactions when I needed to do them from a Coldcard is a partially signed Bitcoin transaction, where I would, essentially I would construct the transaction on, I was using not Sparrow, Spectre, the Spectre wallet, which I keep on my node. I have a full Bitcoin node on my Start9, and that particular wallet does not have the seeds. I constructed that wallet with the Coldcard. but I can look at that wallet and I can construct transactions on that wallet, but I can't sign the transaction from that wallet. I can construct the transaction and then I have to save it to one of those micro SD cards. Then I have to pull that SD card as a partially signed Bitcoin transaction, and then I've got to shove it into my Coldcard and have it read that transaction. And then the Coldcard says, hey, you want to sign this? It's the one that has the seeds, and I don't have to have that hooked to, I can just plug that into a wall socket to get it to power on. I don't have to use a computer to plug it into. That's why it's air gapped. And then I can sign that particular transaction. It signs it to that SD card. And then I pull the SD card out and I put it back into a card reader on my computer, and then let the Spectre wallet read that transaction. And it says, hey, this is a signed transaction. Do you want to send it? That's air gapping. And yet the Bitcoin from all these wallet addresses moved anyway. So the seed that builds these wallets, when you get any hardware wallet from any manufacturer, essentially what happens is that the seed is generated inside the device, and it should have a nearly unimaginable number of possibilities. Insofar as there's so much, and you'll come to know this word a little bit later, as we go on through this, entropy. Entropy is sort of like chaos. Chaos theoreticians. If you ever watched Jurassic Park, the mathematician character, he was a chaos mathematician. That was his specialty, was chaos theory. That's entropy. Right? So if you have the ability to construct a number using something like pure chaos, that's what you want. Because it's really hard to have the exact same set of parameters all in place to regenerate such a big number, and it ends up being exactly the same. It's like being able to not generate two immensely large numbers the same twice. That's sort of where entropy and chaos is coming into this. And Coldcard, me included, the users believe that our devices were choosing from that enormous space. And in my case, it actually did. In fact, there was 200, I know that my seed that was created on the Coldcard had a full 256 bits of entropy. And if you want to know what that is, take the number 2 and raise it to the power 256. It is an extraordinarily large number. And that's what should have happened with everybody using the Coldcard. In fact, that wallet is actually still safe at this moment, even though I've emptied everything out of it. I don't trust Coldcard. I will never recommend CoinKite products to anyone ever again in my entire life, under any circumstances. I may not be able to make any recommendations at all, except for like what I've got, the people that I have in the Circle P, which none of which actually is a hardware wallet vendor. I don't know. I'm going to be doing some deep soul searching on hardware wallets at this point, but that's neither here nor there. So why did the number I generate adhere to the best practices, but after the firmware update occurred, those Coldcards didn't? Well, that was a software integration error that sent the seed generator to fall back on a very predictable random number generator. What does that mean? Well, it means that instead of having 2 raised to the 256 power, which is, again, an immensely large number, literally like the amount of stars in the known universe that we can calculate under standard mathematics, 2 raised to the 256th, there's more than that. There's more numbers in 2 raised to the 256 than there are stars in the known universe, as far as we know. And that's pretty big. That's more than the number of grains of sands on a beach. In fact, if I remember right, it's more than the number of grains of sands on all the beaches on the planet Earth combined and more. So, but what happened was that the firmware upgrade caused the seed generator to do a fallback. And that fallback, instead of using what it should have used, it used a shittier version of it. And instead of generating 2 to the 256, it was generating 2 to the 32nd. In some cases, a little bit more, but not by much. And it turns out that even though 2 raised to the 32nd power is also an immense number, it's trivial for a laptop computer to be able to replicate that number. And that's what was going on. All the seed phrases or all the seeds that were generated with firmware version 4 and above, none of them were developing true entropy, and none of them were even close to approaching 2 to the 128th power, which is a 12-word seed phrase, or 2 to the 256 power, which is a full 24-word seed phrase. The attacker essentially could generate candidate seeds somewhere else and derive the addresses and compare them with the public blockchain to verify that the wallet that was generated was able to generate the private keys generated would be able to generate a wallet that would match something that already existed on the public blockchain, which is infinitely scannable. There's no remote access. There's no malware. It was literally just using math against Coldcard's shitty seed generation after firmware 4.0 upgrade. It's not an upgrade, it's a downgrade. So just imagine buying a lock advertised as having more combinations than anyone could ever search for, and then learn that the factory had really been choosing combinations from just one relatively small binder of possible numbers. The combination still looked pretty complicated, but someone with that binder could just work right through them, and that's what happened. 5 years of unverified trust is what we've put into CoinKite and their product line. So this vulnerable pathway that I'm talking about, firmware 4 and all the versions above that entered into production in 2021. And nobody knew that it was there. Nobody knew that the seed generation was falling back to a shitty random number generation method. Now that we've discovered it, Coldcard said, hey, well, we've got a firmware upgrade. So, what you'll have to do is you'll have to take your Bitcoin, you'll have to put it somewhere else, and then you'll use your Coldcard Mark 3, 4, 5Q, whatever. You'll put in this new firmware, and you'll construct a brand new wallet out of it, and then you'll put your Bitcoin back. Yeah, don't do that. Just, never use another Coldcard product ever, or a CoinKite product ever again. None of them. I wouldn't even trust the block clock at this point. Not that the block clock is something that should or should not be trusted because it's just a clock, but fuck them. Don't give them any of your money. They don't deserve anything at this point. This breach of trust is reprehensible beyond everything that I've ever seen before. I've seen some bullshit in the corporate world. Well, I'm talking about products that suck, but nothing that has had the damaging effects that this thing has had. So don't use Coldcard. Don't use CoinKite products. Don't use Open Dimes. Don't use block clocks. I don't care. If CoinKite made it, get rid of it and never buy from them ever again. That company's fucking toast. It better be. Their revenue better go to zero. Just saying. Let me collect my thoughts for a sec. Hold on. Yeah, the firmware upgrade. Okay, so technically, or supposedly, Coldcard builds a brand new firmware version. Just for this, because of what's going on over the last few days. It came out like yesterday morning or late the night before or something like that. And they were like, look, we fixed it. We fixed the problem. And people were like going, yay. Well, so they had already gotten their Bitcoin off. And then they go to generate a brand new wallet, right? They're not upgrading their old wallet because that won't work. That old wallet is forever screwed. It doesn't matter. So get all of your Bitcoin off there if you haven't done so already. I know it's ridiculous to say at this point, but it is what it is. So these people, they get this firmware upgrade, they download it, they put it into their Coldcard, whatever. And now we're getting reports that the firmware upgrade bricks the unit. Turns it into a paperweight, as it were. Just like a $500, like I think in the case of the Coldcard Q or something like that, it's really expensive. It's like $350 or something. I don't know. It's expensive. And it's now worthless. It's bricked. And even if it, honestly, even I'm not even saying you should do this. Just get your money off of any CoinKite product and never go back. Just we'll do something else. But CoinKite's dead. But even then, they release this firmware thing and it starts bricking people's Coldcard Mark IVs, their Qs, their very expensive, soon to be thrown in the trash, which, by the way, don't do that. Keep the physical unit. God only knows. You may need it later. I don't know. But don't throw it away. Throw it like after all the dust is cleared and the final cat in the bag is died, then maybe throw it away. But there's going to be lawsuits. There's going to be class action lawsuits. There's going to be people trying to recover stuff. There's going to be all kinds of stuff. Don't throw the physical unit away. Don't throw away your old passphrase. Keep everything for evidence, if nothing else, right? Don't use it. Get your shit off there, but don't throw it away. Not yet anyway. The only real remedy for any of this is to go to some other manufacturer that is reputable, and I loathe to say anybody's name because I was so wrong about Coldcard. But go find them, generate a new wallet, roll the dice if they let you do it, do the passphrase if they let you do it, do everything. Get your shit off. Or if you have to, put it on Coinbase. I hate it when, even having to say it, but it's better than keeping your shit on the Coldcard. Don't do that. Go to Coinbase, go to River, go to Unchained, put it on exchange, go to Kraken. At least until you figure out what you want to do. Do you want to remain with self-custody? Do you want somebody to custody your shit for you? Everything at this point is on the table. Because Coldcard's primary job was to just generate an unpredictable key, an unpredictable private key from which all your wallet addresses would be derived from. And they couldn't even fucking do that. They used to be able to do that, but somewhere in 2021, they decided, I don't know what for reasons, and we may touch on some of those. I'm not sure exactly if I should talk about it, but at this point, I kind of don't care. They had the hardware to actually do the key generation, but their firmware upgrade basically screwed that. And review apparently confirmed that security components did in fact exist on the Coldcard, and they had a firmware they did a firmware upgrade that basically made it moot. They spent the money on the secure elements to actually do all this stuff, and the firmware upgrade itself basically bypassed them. Your Coldcard queue has everything on board that you would need to generate a completely unpredictable private key, but their firmware negated it. That's what's going on here, and that's what's been going on for 5 years. It was a failure of end-to-end verification. It wasn't like one unfortunate line of code. Family reserves, retirement savings, business capital, inheritances, years of stacking, years of deferred consumption. These were people who removed their Bitcoin from exchanges and accepted the burden of self-custody because they were trying to do things the right way, and they got hosed. So how did this whole thing play out? Okay, so there's like basically 3 phases, 4 phases, right? So phase 1 of after we've discovered this, after we at first there was dismissal, and then we come to find out that the danger was real, and then we come to find out that the danger is actually expanding. Like in phase 1, who was blamed? Right? We know that early July 30th, wallets were being swept, and it was not done by the wallet owners. And when the dust started to settle or a little bit, all of a sudden the victims themselves were blamed. There were early reports, that were treated as, oh, well, it was your fault. You compromised your seed. And then a lot of people started to assume that malware somehow was injected. It was maybe you accidentally, took a picture of your seed phrase and somehow it got leaked. So all the victims are being blamed. And then we move to phase 2. So again, phase 1, all the victims are blamed. The people that are saying all my Bitcoin's gone, and then everybody going, yeah, it must be your fault. Can't be the Coldcard. It was. Phase 2. This phase revealed coordination on the blockchain, because researchers were starting to identify patterns that were common in these sweeps of Bitcoin from these affected wallet addresses. It's not just isolated thefts. It's a systemic problem endemic to Coldcard. Not to any other hardware wallet that we know of, at least not yet. Right? And that's that we should all be very, very careful as to, oh, well, now it's safe because I'm not on a Coldcard. Yeah, take a deep breath and just think to yourself, what if it's not safe? What if it's not safe there? Don't freak, because when we freak out, we make bad mistakes, bad errors, and we don't want to do that here. But we do need to think seriously about, is it safe? Sort of like Gandalf coming back to Frodo in Lord of the Rings. Is it secret? Is it safe? We should basically be telling ourselves, I'm not sure. And actually spend the time to do something about that. We'll get to that. But there was, we got these common sweep patterns that researchers started to identify. It's systemic Coldcard problem. And the working theory at that point was, oh my God, somehow or another, there's some kind of prediction. There's some sort of predictable seed generation that somebody has found in the Coldcard. And that is, in fact, what happened. But CoinKite pushes back. That's phase 3. That was the next thing that happened, is that, early warnings were all publicly dismissed by CoinKite. The theft is active and it's ongoing, and customers are trying to figure out what the hell to do. You got all these reports basically saying, we think it's an issue with the Coldcard seed generation setup. And CoinKite says, no, it couldn't possibly be. We're the most secure wallet on the planet. All these people love us. Even people who we don't pay, like even podcasters that we don't support. love our products, that they'll tell their listeners, hey, you might want to consider a Coldcard. Fuck me, man. Anyway, phase 4. Now the advisory and the warnings get even wider. Older models are implicated, older models of Coldcard. And the later models are now brought into the warning. And that's where the Mark IV, Mark V, and Q, because at first it was just the Mark III. That's all you needed to worry about, which just happened to be the model of Coldcard that I had, which is why I completely shit my pants. And then, the users who initially believed that they were safe learned that, they might need to migrate. Mark IVs and Mark Vs, or at least there's a couple of cases of Mark IVs address generations that were swept. And then there's a couple of situations where, and it's anecdotal because I can't verify it, but that Mark IVs that had like a simple passphrase as a 25th word for their 24-word seed phrase are also being swept. And like CoinKite at this point, they appear that they're learning about the scope while the attackers continue to operate. So they're, CoinKite's just figuring out that maybe they should take a different stance and take this seriously instead of just dismissing people saying, I have your product and all my shit's gone, bro. And now only at the very end, it took like 48 hours for the CoinKite team to get their ever-loving shit together and at least stop blaming the victims. And the whole thing is really sad. And think of what time of year it is right now. This is the best time to construct this kind of attack. Why? Summer. What happens in summer? People are on vacation with their families. That's what happens in summer. This is the vacation season for most of what you would consider, like I was about to say civilized world, most of the first world. We get to take vacations and shit. We do it in summer. Generally speaking, you don't take your hardware wallet with you in summer. You don't travel with your hardware wallet, right? So you leave it somewhere. You could be like 200, 400, 1,400 miles away, and many people were. And while they're sitting there on vacation with their families, they know what's going on and they know that they can't get back to it. Can you imagine the psychological trauma of trying to enjoy your time with your family and you have your entire family's future tied up in a Coldcard at this point and you can do nothing about it? First, and this is what I had to do, I had to generate a completely new seed. I was lucky that I happened to have another hardware wallet from another manufacturer, but if I didn't, I would have gone to Coinbase probably. I would have just put it on Coinbase, but I happened to have another wallet, so I had to generate a completely new seed on a completely new wallet. Then I had to verify and back up a receive address, and I had to back up the entire wallet. And I do that twice. I make 2 backups, and I keep the backups in 2 different places so that if one place burns down, then I've got a chance to recover from the other place. Then I got to do a test transaction, and make sure that the test transaction goes through, and then I can move the remaining balance before the attacker finds them. And there's a bunch of people on vacation. They can't do any of this. I mean, if they were home, it sucks anyway to have to do this. Imagine being, 1,500 miles away and, you got to take 4 airplane rides and you're trying to just enjoy time with your family whose future is now in jeopardy because of CoinKite and their shitty security practices. it got to the point like people like American Hodl were telling people to call one of their friends that either has a key to their house or can break into their house and tell them exactly where they keep their Coldcard and walk them through exactly how to send all the funds somewhere else. You're trusting your entire life savings, in some cases, like more than life-changing amounts of money, with your friend or your neighbor, and just hoping that they don't steal from you. And I think in most cases they probably wouldn't, but the chances that they make a mistake is high. And yet it was the best advice American Hodl could give. You know, normal physical security rules, just abandon that shit. You know, when respected Bitcoiners are seriously discussing breaking a window to reach a hardware wallet, yeah, all the abstraction is over, dude. BTC Sessions, you know, he's helped a lot of people. He's got a lot of tutorials of a lot of different hardware wallets and other stuff too. Has recommended a Coldcard as well. He's done tutorials on Coldcard. He started reporting that even an MK3 wallet that was protected by a 2-word passphrase was drained. It's not to say that all passphrases were defeated, but still, short, predictable passphrases can be searched alongside the reduced seed space, and that just basically means the reduced seed space is that whole entropy only being, you know, trivially regenerated by a laptop because it had 2 to the 32 bits entropy instead of 2 to the 128th or 2 to 256. You know, Mark IV, the same thing happened with a passphrase. You know, think about it. The first wave of this attack just targeted large balances. I think it was anything over 1.15 Bitcoin. But then there was the later waves started coming in. I think we're on wave number 4 right now. But the second wave moved down the balance curve. So in like things that had only 1.15 Bitcoin and below were being savaged. Then the transaction patterns, they changed, suggesting adaptation, but it also suggested, you know, multiple attackers, you know, copycat guys that were like, hey, that's a great idea. Now that we know how to do it, you know, we can back engineer exactly how to do it, given what we know so far from the news on X. And then other people got into the game. The theft is still unfolding at this time. You cannot keep your Bitcoin on a Coldcard, even if you generated it with firmware on a Mark 1 or Mark 2, or even firmware on a Mark 3 that was not firmware version 4. It was underneath, like 3.x or something like that. Don't trust it. At this point, don't trust it. Because we don't, I mean, if CoinKite failed so spectacularly on this particular, the upgrade, I say that in quotes, the upgrade from version 3.x to version 4.x, if that was such a fabulous and spectacular fail, what else could be lurking in there? So if you've got like let's say you got a Mark II and you've already checked your balance and you've been checking it all weekend long and you checked it before you went to work this morning and everything's fine, you need to get your shit off of any CoinKite product. Go somewhere else. Go to Coinbase. I don't know. Go to Kraken. I would never in my life think that I would ever be advising anybody to do like some kind of centralized custody. Yet here we are. If you've got another hardware, you know, wallet vendor that you now trust more than CoinKite, I don't know what to tell you, because I was advising people to go get a Coldcard and I was so horribly wrong. I don't want to advise anybody doing anything ever again. I'm sure one of these days I will when the smoke clears, but right now I don't feel good about advising anybody to do a goddamn thing except wherever you put it, Get your Bitcoin off of the CoinKite product. But when you, if for whatever reason you decide to do that, you can't do it in a panic because you'll make a mistake. Even if you like a Mark 1 and you really believe it's safe, you have breathing room. You can calm your mind, maybe do meditation before you even start doing this. Take your time setting up a different wallet, or take your time figuring out, if you do centralized exchange, which one you want to go to. That's got to be up to you. Because, like I said, I don't feel good about advising Kraken over River, or River over Unchained, or Unchained over Coinbase. I don't want to say any of that because I don't want to be wrong again at this fucking scale. Still, though, keeping the Bitcoin on any CoinKite product at this point, I think is foolish. That's the only thing that I can really say about that one. The theft is still ongoing. It's like it won't stop. People that thought they were protected with passphrases are finding out, well, I only had a 2-word passphrase and I got stolen from. So this is a hard time for Bitcoin. I imagine the feelings are similar to Mt. Gox. I got into Bitcoin right after the Mt. Gox hack, so I don't know what the sentiment was really like, because it happened, much earlier than when I got into Bitcoin in 2015. Still, though, I can't imagine it not feeling like a kick in the crotch, a gut punch, and a punch to the nose all at once for even people that weren't on Mt. Gox, because they were like, what does this mean for the whole space? Right? And like I said, the attack is still ongoing, but now there's a completely different format of it. The first format of just sweeping actual physical addresses generated through shitty entropy, that's still ongoing, right? But now we have an added layer called phishing. Emails are now being sent. Jack Spirko kind of like predicted. He said that the phishing incidents will occur. People are going to start getting emails about, hey, we're Coldcard and your shit got hacked and we're here to help. They're not there to help. They're not there to help. They're not there to help. Even Foundation Devices has set out a warning saying something about phishing incidences with the Foundation name on it. Every hardware manufacturer is going to have a phishing expedition sent in their name. Be aware, right? So they begin, like, these phishing incidents will look like this. It'll begin with truthful information about the Coldcard. They'll have links to legitimate reporting. They'll use language that talk about entropy and random number generator failures, also known as RNG, random number generator. The need for urgent migration. They'll offer some kind of fake security protocol, or God forbid, a wallet audit. Don't do it. They'll ask you to enter in your seed phrase, or they'll ask you to install malicious software. Then they're going to drain the wallet. We're going to start getting reports about people who have physically gotten their wallet drained off of their wallet created by a ledger because they fell for a phishing incident. This is going to last for a very long time. So this is a completely second layer. Like in Foundation, Foundation's fake. I mentioned Foundation's fake. Here's what it looked like. It started with technical language. They manufactured the authority because they had the logo of Foundation Devices on it and all that stuff. Then they gave the user in the email a deadline. Oh my God, you got to do this now. You got to do it now. They actually put a button in the phishing email that says urgent, and it's a button that you can push to immediately take you through the steps. And the procedure is exactly what some frightened user would want to see, and it's going to result in the exact same shit. They're going to drain all your Bitcoin. And it's not going to be any one of these hardware wallet manufacturers' fault so far. All of them seem to be pretty solid, but again, I'm loath to believe anything at this point. I'm just saying. As regarding these phishing attacks, no wallet manufacturer needs your seed phrase. If they ask for it, it's fake. It is a fake email and it's designed to take all of your money. Never enter a seed phrase into any website for any reason whatsoever. If they call you for somehow on the phone, don't tell them your seed phrase or any information at all, because a wallet manufacturer will not ask. Don't ever install some kind of emergency tool from an unsolicited message. That basically means you just got it without you actually reaching out to somebody like Bitbox or BitKey or Blockstream or whatever. If you didn't write them an email that says, please respond to this email, help me, what the fuck do I do? Then they send you one back that's replying to that email that you sent. That is solicited. If you just get an email, like you woke up this morning or you wake up tomorrow morning and there's like some kind of email from some hardware wallet manufacturer, it's unsolicited. You should probably delete it, right? You need to find the official source independently. Do not trust any links sent to you, any text messages sent to you, any phone calls made to you. None of that. That is all unsolicited. You've got to be the one to reach out and do the work. And I hate it that you have to do the work, but here we are. But I want to end today with talking about the other reactions to this entire thing. The volunteer rescue teams that sprung to action and are still working, some without sleep for 48 hours. I'm serious. Of course, then again, I have to say, well, do I believe that Rob Hamilton hasn't slept in 24 hours? I don't know. I'm not in Rob Hamilton's apartment or house. I'm not watching Rob Hamilton do his shit, but he's one of the guys that's trying to help. But I can't verify any of this, but it looks to me like there are many, many people like BTC Sessions, Rob Hamilton. I can't remember all the names. I wish I could. I wish I had the wherewithal to write them all down on a list of paper. But there are like multiple handfuls of people that are doing nothing but essentially customer service for companies that they don't work for, or companies that aren't even their companies. You got Foundation Devices advising people on how to help people that have a completely different hardware wallet from a completely different manufacturer. They're helping, they're doing everything. You know, mentors have been forming private coordination groups, volunteers handling affected users one-on-one, volunteers saying, telling people on things like Telegram and Twitter and Nostr, if you need help, reach out to me. I will try to help you. You know, these people are working without sleep or compensation. Some are spending their own money to help other people or basically reinforce at the level of the common good. You know, some calls ended in relief. Some of these, there was a lot of calls that these volunteers were actually able to help these people get their funds somewhere else. And then other phone calls just ended in tears because their funds were already gone. And once they're gone, they're gone. You know, BTC Sessions is one of those people that's been helping. He reported that volunteer efforts at this point have helped protect tens of millions of dollars. You know, that figure is coming out of BTC Sessions. I'm not hanging out with BTC Sessions right now. I'm not at his house or wherever he is. I think he's in Australia. I'm not there. I'm not watching him. I'm not having a beer with him. I'm not trying, I'm not there to help him. So I don't know. But tens of millions of dollars, I don't know. I could see it. There's Mandrick, Madex, as well as, Rob Hamilton. They're all trying to help. Visible people represented only a fraction of those that are actually helping, like Mandrick and BTC Sessions and Madex. These are the guys that I was able to see. But there are so many other people that are like literally just losing sleep to try to help everybody else. People that don't work for CoinKite. CoinKite has barely said a fucking word except that, hey, they got a firmware update that we find out it doesn't work. Oh, hey, we're destroying all the cold cards that we have that are affected, that we have in inventory. Whatever. Not helping. CoinKite still had this shit for sale for 48 fucking hours after everybody knew what was going on and we knew that it was CoinKite's fault. And they were still selling their shit, except they had a warning label on their website. Individuals and teams dropped their normal work. We're talking people from River, people from Unchained, maybe even Coinbase. I don't know. I haven't heard anything from Coinbase, but it wouldn't surprise me if they weren't dropping all of their work, putting everything on hold to help people they don't know, they've never met, and they're not going to get any money to do anything, and still are there helping them, trying to salvage this situation. The community is handling essentially technical support for every company under the sun. Migration, transaction tracing, research, God forbid, emotional triage, because the emotional effects of this are devastating for the people that lost the money, surely, and most horrifically, but even to the people who didn't, because the foundations are now physically shook. This is the immune system that we've always talked about in Bitcoin showing itself. This is the fever. Except in this particular case, it's people like BTC Sessions and Rob Hamilton losing sleep so they can help people that they've never met. That's the fever that the immune system causes when it's trying to heal the body. When the institutional immune system fucking shit the bed, it was the Bitcoin community that produced its own white blood cells. Rob Hamilton used this language. This may be one of the highest leverage harm reduction moments in history. Nothing was more important than preventing the emotional and financial destruction of losing everything. In contrast, we have CoinKite, who had years to verify its product. Volunteers, they had hours to rescue its customers. Jesus. So I mentioned that we've crossed the Rubicon. The hell does that even mean? People use that term, oh, we've crossed the Rubicon, and I think that there's still probably a lot of people that don't understand the meaning of what that means. It's Caesar, back in the times of ancient Rome. He was traveling with his army coming out of Gaul, which is modern-day France. And he crossed the river Rubicon with his army that was still in armor and was still armed with swords and shields and helmets and spears and all the accoutrement that goes along with the Roman army. They were supposed to completely divest themselves of all armament before crossing the Rubicon. That was Roman law. You could not cross the Rubicon with an army. And Caesar did it, and he did it for a reason. He did it because that's the Caesar that we all know that took over Rome. He did it by force. He did it with a single army that he was in command of when he did it and he became dictator. When he crossed the Rubicon, he said this: the die is cast. And it was somebody on Nostr that reminded me that Caesar said that when he crossed the Rubicon, in full knowledge that what he was doing was not only illegal, but he knew what he was going to do. The die was cast. It's ironic that that applies here because people, this whole dice rolling meme that we've got going on. You know, if you didn't roll the dice, well, it's your fault that you lost all your shit. I won't even get into the vagaries of that one, but the irony is real still. As we all know, Caesar then took over Rome, and then he was the dictator for years and years and years, and he wasn't exactly the nicest guy ever. He was the guy that basically got stabbed to death by Brutus and Marcus. Was it Marcus? I can't remember. Marcus Aurelius, I guess. That was another emperor. I can't remember. It was Marcus something. I can't remember his name. It was a trusted friend, and Brutus was one of his best friends too. And even those guys, along with the entirety of the Roman Senate, stabbed him to fucking death. You get a Shakespeare play out of that one, by the way. In either event, we've crossed the Rubicon like Caesar crossed his. And it's not Bitcoin that crossed the Rubicon. It's artificial intelligence, because that's sort of how this entire thing was perpetrated. Now, we don't know for sure, but I can't imagine AI not being used to discover the vulnerability in the Coldcard stuff. And I also think that it helped build search processes, construct and then conduct the transactions, you know, basically automating all the sweeps of all the Bitcoin and all the affected wallets. You know, we haven't conclusively demonstrated that is the truth publicly, but it's not going to surprise me when that news breaks. AI systems can now read giant code repositories. It can trace dependencies. It can propose, exploits, and it can even automate the testing. And attackers can rerun improved models against open source projects just again and again and again and again. And that's one of the ways that we think the first wave attacker was able to find this vulnerability, because think about it, this didn't go on for 5 years. And yet it could have happened at any time in the last 5 years. Since 2021, this shit could have happened any time, and it didn't. So the theory is that somebody decided to say, you know what? Let's look at all the firmware upgrades that CoinKite has done, or actually what they probably did is say, let's look at all the firmware upgrades of all the hardware wallet manufacturers and see if we can find a vulnerability that's exploitable. And they found one in CoinKite, specifically inside the Coldcard, specifically firmware version 4 and above. And it looked like the AI was basically able to immediately, and this has been replicated a couple of times by other users who have done the exact same thing, has said basically, look for the firmware upgrades for CoinKite and tell me if you can find an exploit. And time after time after time, the AI, no matter what model is being used, seems to come back with, yeah, in this firmware upgrade, it's basically given the ability for the Coldcard to fall back to a random number generation schema that doesn't really work. And it only provides this much entropy, this, 2 raised to the 32 bits of entropy, which is, again, trivial for a laptop to be able to break given about 9 minutes. This attack has been replicated by all kinds of white hat hackers that have actually been able to find wallet addresses that have already been affected and drained on their own without giving Kimmy or whatever any prior knowledge to that wallet address, was able to find the same wallet address using the same methods. Hundreds of wallet addresses, in fact. So this is why AI is most definitely involved, even though it hasn't actually been, verified, but it will be. I guarantee it. So now that AI systems can read these huge repositories and, multiple firmware upgrades and compare them to each other and find vulnerabilities, periodic human audits just aren't enough because of that. Now audits are going to have to be done every day. So Rob Hamilton, in between helping most people try to, not have a reason to kill themselves, he basically has spent so far as we know, and again, I'm not with Rob Hamilton, I'm not at his house, I can't verify, but he said that he has spent more than $10,000 on tokens, specifically for Kimi K3. He's scanned and audited more than 100 Bitcoin-related libraries with that $10,000 worth of tokens using Kimi K3. The human red team has been put together to validate the AI's findings when the audit is complete, to make sure that there's human eyeballs as well as artificial intelligence eyeballs involved in this ongoing set of audits that Rob Hamilton has been doing since the news of this Coldcard hack broke. And I don't like calling it a hack. Technically, it's not a hack. It's an exploit of a shitty system. Technical and non-technical Bitcoiners, Rob Hamilton is invited to contribute. You don't even have to be technical. And I'm sure if you were to say, Rob, you said non-technical Bitcoiners can help. I don't know how. Maybe he'll direct you to somebody who can tell you exactly how you can help. Maybe there's something written. I don't know. Rob Hamilton is blowing up on Twitter right now because he has basically been fucking tireless trying to help. Whether or not AI found this exact bug first is almost really beside the point. Here's the point. From now on, this is why I've said that we've crossed the Rubicon, because from now on this side of the Rubicon, every company must assume that adversarial machines are reading every line of code it publishes every second of the day, every week, for 52 weeks a year, 375 days a year, every single year. I mean, from now on, if one potential hacker isn't doing it on some system, another is. And this goes far, far, far beyond Bitcoin. And this is what I don't understand. Why didn't they attack banks first? Is bank security actually, they probably have, but bank security, as far as entropy is concerned, is industry standard, 128-bit to 256-bit encryption. Coldcard never had that, or hasn't had that in 5 years. But I guarantee you that those systems are being tested. You got water systems in Missouri or in the Midwest that have been attacked. God only knows why water systems are online, or why water systems would want to be why you would want to attack water systems, unless you want to shut down a water supply to an AI warehouse data center. My wife suggested that because you're not getting any money out of that attack. That's for damn sure. You're spending money on that attack. But banks are at risk. Governments are at risk. Why didn't they attack the IRS? Why not? Why not completely destroy the IRS computing system so that we don't have to work with these fuckers anymore? They didn't do that. No, they went after Coldcard. They went after Bitcoin. They didn't go after Ethereum. You could construct all manner of conspiracy theories around it, but none of it really matters right now. Where we are is not where we were. That's what I'm getting at. Every single day from now on. Now, of course, you'll be saying, well, David, this has been going on for probably 3 years. Yeah, but this is the visible crossover point, at least for me. Maybe not for you. Maybe your crossover point was somewhere else, but I get the feeling that this is crossing the Rubicon for a large percentage of the world. Well, actually for Bitcoiners, but also it's going to be for people that have been looking at Bitcoin that aren't Bitcoiners going, what does this mean for, I don't know, my electrical grid? What does this mean for my water system? What does this mean for my bank account, my pension account, my retirement stuff? Anything like, what is this? What kind of attack could I perpetrate on a homeowner specifically about their deed? Could I falsify their deed in the digital domain? Is there a way that I could take possession of their property? This goes way beyond Bitcoin. This is a token war. It's a security moat. Remember we talk about regulatory moats? Well, welcome to security moating. I lost my Bitcoin in a moating accident. You know, you can just say it like that. Like, for instance, the token war. You know, continuous AI review costs tokens. You know, it also costs compute and skilled human validation when shit's found out. Wealthy companies can buy a lot more scrutiny and run a lot more models more often than you can. You know, like smaller firms just may be unable to afford the new minimum security standard. Let me put a tinfoil hat on for a second. They planned it this way. No, I don't know that if that's true, but that's where we find ourselves. It's become a form of regulatory moating. It's just not with a regulator. The cost of proving safety becomes the license required to compete. And if you cannot be like Rob Hamilton, where you can just puke up $10,000 in goodwill, he's doing this for goodwill, right? He's not trying to test a product that he wants to offer. He's doing this for goodwill. And in 3 days, he spent $10,000 in tokens. Imagine you want to construct, like you've got an idea for a brand new Bitcoin hardware wallet and you want to compete on the open market. How much money do you have for continual AI-based auditing of your code, all your firmware, everything? How much money do you have to do it every day? Because that's what's going to be fucking required at this point. At least every firmware upgrade, but you're racing against the clock, against somebody that also has a shit ton of money to buy a lot of AI tokens to be able to do continual code review over several models of your code to find vulnerabilities because your code secures something of value. Again, it doesn't have to be Bitcoin. It can be central records in Houston, Texas, where you keep, like the tax office or whatever, where you keep deeds. Are we still going to trust a paper deed with my signature on it and, I don't know, the tax assessor's office on it? I don't know. I've been so long since I've seen a house deed, it's not even funny. But are we going to trust the paper over the digital record? And if not, how do we know that the digital record hasn't been changed? Because the system securing those digital records was compromised 5 years ago by fucking AI or something. You get where I'm going with it? That's why I say we've crossed the Rubicon. It's just that the cost of doing this at this point is now an added cost of doing business. And a lot of small businesses can't compete as it is. And this whole thing, if you're a hardware wallet manufacturer right now and you're not prepared to do AI testing at scale on your code and your firmware and everything about your product, you need to advise all of your customers that they need to migrate off of your shit. And then only after no more customer support tickets are coming in do you close your company, because you're going to get somebody hurt. And that's where we are. We are on the other side of the Rubicon. However, there's one other thing that could possibly be happening that is good. participate in shared open source auditing infrastructure, like what Rob Hamilton said. Hey, technical and non-technical Bitcoiners alike can participate in what's been going on with the Coldcard. But that could also occur into the future with no end date in sight, right? We could maybe build a pool to, for token funding, for compute and prompting, testing, human review of those AI audits, all of that. We could all take part of that, even at the least. Like, we could be a complete retard and at least try to help. Because out of hundreds of people, executing their own audits, even if they don't know exactly what they're doing, maybe they actually turn up a red flag because they used a different AI model to review the code on the GitHub repository for company X. And then they say, hey, I don't know what it means, but I found this. And here it is. I'll give it, here it is. I'll give it to you. Because a lot of us already have the ability to do something like that without buying an exorbitant amount of tokens. If we pool all this, like we used to talk about, like pooling, like mining pools, they first started with a bunch of small miners getting together saying, we're stronger together and we'll pool our resources. There's no reason not to do it again, except this time it's for things like code review, but it goes beyond code. I think I want to use the term swarm audits. Like, a smaller project may have to depend on accepting community swarm audits of their code. And it may be confusing, and it may be filled with a lot of noise. But there's people there that are probably trying to help. There's also people there that would probably try to inject something in like that because of maliciousness. Exactly how that would, and I don't mean to inject something into the code base, basically trying to construct an argument as to why a line of code needs to be taken out and falsified. Nothing is off the table at this point, but I want to believe that there's more good people than bad people, and that the signal to noise between good versus bad, the good people will squelch out the bad. I can't guarantee that. But swarm audits like I did it. I did an audit on Bitbox 02 Nova's code base, which happened to be the code base that they're using for a lot of their products. No, I'm not recommending it. I'm not recommending anything today. One of these days, maybe I will find somebody. I don't know. But right now, I don't want to recommend shit. I just want to tell you what I did. I went to Grok and like at the level of coding and auditing code, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I don't. And it's okay for me to admit. It's better for me to admit that shit than to fake it, right? So I don't know what I'm doing, but I do this. I get to Grok and I say, look, will you do me a favor? Reach out and discover on the interwebs where Bitbox, the company, keeps their code for the Bitbox 2 or Bitbox 02 Nova, and audit the code and discover if there's any vulnerabilities and report back to me just to see if it would work. I did this. I did that prompt just to see if it would work. I had to walk away from it because I was like, I don't know. I didn't even give it the repository URL. I didn't know where to go look. I knew where to go look, but I didn't know if I wasn't sure. So I just said, look, I just want to do an experiment. Get Grok to go find a GitHub repository that I don't know the URL to and see if it actually finds it, audits it, and comes up with a report. And it fucking did. It did. It came up with a report. Said it was clean. Now, I don't believe it because I believe in nothing, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm advising anybody to do shit except get your Bitcoin off of a CoinKite product at ASAP. Other than that, I'm not advising anybody do shit. You got to figure the rest out on your own, I guess, at least for right now, until all of us figure out how to advise people without getting them in trouble, because nothing is safe. Anyway, So it comes back, it not only finds the GitHub repository, but it starts like, I actually put a screenshot of a lot of the messages that it sent back before it, I don't know if you've ever used Grok, but it will tell it kind of like give you a timeline of what it's doing or where it's at or what it went to or, things like that. And then when it finally finishes doing all, actually thinking about the situation and starts writing out the, its response, it basically wipes all that. So I made sure to take a screenshot of what it was doing. And it not only did it find the Bitbox GitHub repository, it started telling me what libraries it was looking for, firmware stuff it was looking for, the libraries that it found, firmware that it found, code base that it found. And then it came back with the report and said, hey, this is what I found. And I'm just going to say that there was another person that sort of did kind of the same thing, except they were much more technically advanced, and I cannot remember their name, but they basically audited all the major hardware wallet manufacturer brands like Jade, anybody that was open source, right? And one of the reasons that Coldcard failed so miserably is that in 2021, right after, as they were doing that firmware upgrade, they basically turned their code from open source, fully open source, to closed source. It was code viewable, which I've said before on this podcast, but I didn't realize what the fuck I was talking about. Let's just admit it to be, so we can get past it. It was source viewable. You could view the source, and I guess you could take screenshots or maybe even lift some code directly off of it. But it's not like being fully open source. It's not FOSS, free and open source software. But all these other manufacturers that this guy listed in this, basically a brief of, is this wallet company, secure, or is this wallet manufacturer's hardware secure? He basically made a table. And the only one that completely failed miserably was Coldcard. And the real reason is for two reasons. One, we already know how badly it failed. But two, it couldn't get to the source code to actually examine it. But everything else basically passed. But there were 4 manufacturers that were in the green, had a little, basically said, we find nothing at all problematic. There was a couple of other wallet manufacturers while they're safe, they had like other issues that didn't have anything to do with entropy, like some other kind of bug, that didn't have anything to do with wallet generation or anything like that. But basically everything was safe. But 4 manufacturers were in the green, and I can't tell you their names. Why? Because I don't want to add misery to anybody in case because he's a dude on the internet. And I have to not trust him. He's probably a fine individual. His children maybe think he's, hung the moon, and his wife thinks that he can do no wrong, and maybe he's a monk in his off time. I don't know. But I'm not going to tell you the names of who came up green. But 4 of them came up green with no issues being found. Imagine if we all did something like that, each to his skills or her skills, each to the level of money that they are willing to spend on tokens. I get a certain amount of tokens basically every month from OpenAI and from Grok. Now, I'm not a subscriber to Grok, so I get way less tokens, but I basically had enough to at least do a cursory examination of Bitbox's code repository, and it came up clean as far as Grok was concerned. But wouldn't it be nice if somebody else did the same thing, but even deeper, but used something like Kimmy K3 to do it? But that's what Rob Hamilton is kind of doing. And I'm sure at one point or another, a full report is forthcoming. I haven't seen it yet. I don't know. And I'm not going to conjecture any further than that. I'm just saying that this is what I mean by swarm auditing. A lot of us have tokens that we can basically donate basically by probably not by direct donation. Probably can't do that on your basic monthly subscription to OpenAI. But maybe you could put it out on Nostr or Twitter saying, if I had to write a prompt, not knowing anything about code review for, X particular model, whatever model that you have access to, what prompt would you want me to send so that I can help the community with the audit process. But the swarm auditing idea, this can't just end. It can't be a flurry of activity right up front, and then like a couple of weeks later, we just stop doing it. We are not on that side of the Rubicon anymore. We are on this side of the Rubicon. And I guess we're all going to have to be responsible for all the products that are out there when it comes, at least when it comes to Bitcoin, at least when it comes to self-custody, at least when it comes to wallet software, whether it's generating a seed or it's just being used as for some, for a wallet interface, and it uses the seed generation from something else. Some other manufacturer's hardware wallet did the seed phrase. Maybe we should be responsible, or not responsible, but maybe we should do everything we can to figure out a way to audit Coinbase's, custody software. I don't know. See, that's the problem. I don't have all the answers, but the term swarm audit, I want you to remember that. This idea may go nowhere. I'm not a huge voice on Twitter. I'm actually barely visible on Twitter. I've got one of the smallest fucking podcasts in the Bitcoin space. I don't get on YouTube, and I don't have flashy backgrounds and a cool suit to wear and flashing my fucking Rolex and all that kind of shit. So I literally am bottom of the barrel podcast right here. I don't have any sponsors at all. It's nobody's going to listen to me, but maybe they'll listen to you. If you think swarm audit is a good phrase and one to pass along to somebody that because people do listen to you because you have a larger presence than I ever will on X or something like that, then if you find the idea with merit, then spread it. Don't even give me credit. I don't care. Take credit. Say it was my idea. I don't care, because I think that this is the only way that smaller businesses and plebs can survive. Small projects are going to have to audit their shit all the time now. We don't live on the other side of the Rubicon. We live here now. Maybe the swarm audit looks something like this. Submit the repository, run multiple AI models against critical code paths, compare results, escalate credible findings privately, help fund token usage as I've said, encourage every project to maintain a security.md. That would be a markdown file of all their security stuff, like their security practices, their audits, their anything that has something to do with their security that the public can see needs to be accessible on a second by second basis so people can look at it. Never mistake unverified model output for some kind of confirmed vulnerability, but also never mistake some unverified model output for confirmed security. Multiple audits from multiple people using multiple models every day. That's why this is so awful that we have to even contemplate becoming a security force. We're always used to companies doing this for themselves, not for us. Just passing the cost of that on to the consumer. That's what we're used to. We're not used to being part of not just one company, but all of them. And that's why this side of the river looks so much different than the other side of the river, the one that we came from. Because AI is here and it widens the whole searchlight, right? We can still determine whether the finding is real and how to disclose it, but we're going to need help. And we're going to need to be using the same tools that are being used to tear the system down. While this episode is being recorded, the final number of Bitcoin stolen and the final number of wallet addresses, which is it's approaching 2,000 Bitcoin and 6,000 wallet addresses. By the time I finish with this, I don't know. Haven't looked. Vulnerable seeds are still vulnerable. You can't change that. Attackers are definitely still searching, and nobody knows how many wallets remain funded. I should say affected wallets. So the takeaway is move vulnerable funds. I can't tell you where. I wish I could, but I'm really shaken in everything because I, for so long, had recommended to so many people like 5 days a week the Coldcard, and I was so fucking wrong about it. I can't recommend anything right now, but I can recommend that you get your vulnerable funds somewhere else. Second, demand continuous security verifications, not only from the companies, but from ourselves as well. Now, we need to ask our wallet manufacturers, what in your organization is continuously audited? I mean, do we need to start auditing the circuit? What about the chips involved? Not just the code and the firmware and all the stuff. All the rest of the stuff that we don't think about, like literally, should we be auditing? Take a pit, like break open, like let's say that all the dust is cleared and I finally think it's okay to destroy my Coldcard. Should I rip it out of its clear case and take pictures of the circuit board front and back and send it to AI and say, can you find anything physically wrong with the way this circuit board is laid out? I don't know. I mean, I'm asking you. If that may be completely stupid. I don't know, but maybe there is a vulnerability in circuit boards. That's how bad this is, right? How often do you audit all your code or whatever it is that you can't audit it? What tools do you use to audit your code? Who the fuck validates these findings, and how do they validate them? Does your testing include production firmware, or do you use actual hardware behavior? What do you do? And honestly, after all this, is there something that's unresolved that you need to tell us about? Something that we need to know? Join the swarm. Maybe the swarm is the third thing that I'll suggest, where we do the whole thing of submitting repositories for review and funding the audits. And, like I said, it's like, we're already strapped for cash as it is. Nobody's got a lot of money right now. Let's just be honest. And that's pretty much all of the West. Plebs just don't have a whole lot of cash laying around. Some people do. I think most don't. But, how can you review the findings? Can you spend some time? Are you competent enough to maybe test a potential fix? Build open security infrastructure, help the white blood cells find the disease before the attacker does. I mean, what can we do on our side? Can we do anything at all? Or are our hands completely tied, whether or not we want to help, whether or not we do have the money to help? But the swarm audit idea, I don't think we can get away from doing that. I think we're going to have to. I don't think we have a choice. July 30th was not simply the day Coldcard failed. It was the day that every software company lost the right to point toward an audit completed in the past and call it security. Attackers, they're just going to bring machines to the repository every single day now. And the defenders of that repository are going to have to do the same. You need to really move your funds. And we also need to demand evidence of security. We trusted, but we didn't verify, and that shit needs to end right now. We used to be way more adversarial than we are. And we need to get back to that somehow. My heart goes out to anybody that's affected, because the emotional trauma is, there's no way to audit that for a single individual or everybody as a group. There's no way to even think about the fact that a lot of people who didn't lose their funds are literally losing sleep right now because they don't know if their funds are safe or not, because this thing shook everything to the foundation. But please be aware of one thing. This was because of Rodolfo Novak and CoinKite and their shitty code. Their allowance of their firmware update to allow the Coldcard to fall back to a shitty number generation schema. That's why this happened. I see zero reports of any other hardware wallet manufacturer getting hacked. And you'll say, well, you told us about Ledger. That was an email hack. And that's bad. I'm not saying it's good. The two Ledger data hacks are a breach of customer confidence, no doubt. But what was not breached was their actual wallet. Nobody in those two data breaches lost any of their funds. And I've talked shit about Ledger this entire time. Well, at least since 2022, I guess. But you get what I'm saying. They didn't lose anybody's funds. Trezor and Ledger both are shit, they're shitcoin wallets. Although Trezor does have a Bitcoin only version, but Trezor hasn't had any problems. I'm not saying that they won't. I'm just saying that right now, as of right now, I haven't seen a report on any other hardware wallet manufacturer making this level of a fucking mistake. It's inexcusable. It's inexcusable. The whole thing is inexcusable. If you want to take it out on me because I recommended a Coldcard and I fucked up your life, I don't blame you. You can do with me whatever you want. I don't know. I know there's a lot of people that are now being called influencers. I'm going to take an example here. Marty Bent and Matt Odell. They're getting fucking savaged by people who I'd never thought would go after them. And here's my standpoint. Yes, they are investors in CoinKite as part of 1031. That's their venture capital arm. Yes, they are, part of this whole deal. I don't think that they're bad people. I just don't. I've met Matt Odell personally at least once. Talked to him for a long time, at BitBlock Boom. I've listened to him and Marty on various podcasts, sometimes together, sometimes separate. I haven't found anything that makes me think they're malicious or anything like that. It doesn't mean that I'm saying that you need to trust them or whatever. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm just getting at that there's going to be a lot of collateral damage is what I'm saying. A lot of reputations got burnt to ash, and if mine is part of it, well, then mine's part of it. I already told you the deal with Coldcard. Don't need to with me trying to get a sponsorship with CoinKite. I don't need to rehash it. But I've said on several occasions on this show over the years that it takes years to build a reputation and it takes seconds to burn it down. Sometimes that's not entirely true, because for 5 years, I was recommending a vulnerable hardware wallet. So that means it took seconds to realize that my reputation was going to be burnt to the fucking ground. But it took 5 years to get there. Everything is not exactly what it seems. But if we start chaining liability, then where does that chain of liability end? Because right now, it's just on, let's say, Matt Odell. It's all his fault because he's part of 1031 and 1031 is an investor in CoinKite, and CoinKite lost all my money. So it's Matt Odell's fault too. Is it? What if your friend told you about Matt Odell and you started listening to Matt Odell because your friend told you, hey, I trust this guy. You should listen to his podcast. He's got he's on a couple of different podcasts, blah, blah, blah. And then you start listening to Matt Odell, and then you go, okay, well, he recommends Coldcard, and oh, look, 1031, which is, he's a co-founder of, is part of Cold. I'm going to get a Coldcard because I trust this. And then you get all your money is taken away from you because of the vulnerability. Is it Matt Odell's fault, or is it now your friend's fault? Your best friend? Your friend that, I don't know, you went to in college and you asked to be your best man at your wedding. Is it now his fault? Is he the fucking Coldcard shill? Maybe your best friend heard about it from somebody else, maybe his own nephew. Said, hey, uncle, I'm listening to these two guys and they're really funny and blah, blah, blah. Is it the nephew's fault? This is why what I hate the most about liability chains, because nobody ever thinks to do the most simple thing to focus their energy on where it belongs. Cut the chain. There's only one person at fault here, and his name is Rodolfo Novak. His shitty company allowed shitty code, and it destroyed thousands of lives all at once, and it very well may be unrecoverable. There's people that are looking at the wallet address that have addresses that have absconded with all the Bitcoin. It seems to be possible that the attacker accidentally linked the attacker's identity by using a third-party service to facilitate the attack, even though that third party didn't really know what was going on, because they offered this service where, some kind of blockchain service, and this guy bought it. Is it possible that identity went along for the ride? Because we know what service it is. I don't know the name myself, but many people have said that we know who this is. Is it possible to find that person? Link them to we know the addresses are linked. Is it possible that people could possibly get their money back from this? I don't know. I hope. I'll pray for it, but that's sort of like apologizing and saying, I'm sorry. It's just words. Even if there was 24 of them, they might not mean what I would hope that they would mean. I'll see you on the other side. This has been Bitcoin and I'm your host, David Bennett. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and hope to see you again real soon. Have a great day.